It's January. Everybody's doing their top 10 of the previous year list. It's also a new decade, so everybody's doing their top 10 of the decade list. So I'm going to be doing my decade one right now for you guys. This was a decade of amazing movies, so I'm going to try to do one movie from each year of the decade, but I'm also going to talk about some honorable mentions very briefly and try to narrow it down as much as I can. Keep in mind, this is just my favorite movies from each year. I don't necessarily think that maybe they were the best. They were just, I think, the best time that I had at the movie theater those particular years, or just in general, well, those movies. I just kept going back to them and watching them over and over again. There are some movies that I can acknowledge are better than these movies, but just personally, in my preferences, these are my favorite movies from each year of the 2010s. Start off the list with the first year of the decade, 2010. There were some serious heavy hitters this year. Some of my favorites from 2010 include the Coen brothers' Western revision of True Grit with Matt Damon and Jeff Bridges. It was just... that movie is just excellent. I think it far surpasses the original in a lot of ways, and it's just... there's not a lot of westerns that get made like this anymore. Darren Aronofsky's surrealist nightmare that is Black Swan. That movie, I was just on the edge of my seat the whole time, and by the end, I was just... I needed to just relax and breathe. It was intense, and it was amazing from start to finish. Edgar Wright's video game movie, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. This movie underperformed at the box office this year, but it kind of has become a cult classic as it's gone on, and it's definitely become one of my favorite comedies of the past decade. The third Toy Story movie came out this year and just gut-punched us all, and little did we know, almost a decade later, another Toy Story would come out and be just as good. These guys, Pixar can very rarely do anything wrong, and Toy Story 3 was just a perfect way to emotionally hit everyone who had grown up with the series all the way to that point. It was kind of genius writing by that point. This year also saw How to Train Your Dragon, which is, in my opinion, DreamWorks' best animated series. And then this year also saw two of Leonardo DiCaprio's best movies, Shutter Island and Inception. I rewatch both of those movies at least every year. I think that they're just both such great movies for totally different reasons, and they're both totally mind-bending in different ways. One's kind of a psychological thriller. The other one is more of an action thriller, sci-fi. I mean, they're just... if you haven't seen either of those movies, I don't know what else to tell you. You should be already watching them right now. And as for my number one movie of 2010, I have to give it to Aaron Sorkin and David Fincher's The Social Network. Just everything about that movie is like a masterclass in movie making, and just the score, the cinematography, the directing, the writing, the acting. Everyone was top-notch in this movie, and it's just endlessly rewatchable for me. It is a movie that everyone thought was just going to be about Facebook, but it ended up being so much more, and it touched on loneliness and isolation in a social media driven world, and greed, and just a lot of interesting themes, and I'm glued to the screen every single time I watch it. So that is my pick for 2010. Moving on to 2011. Some of my favorite movies from 2011 include The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. This is another one from director David Fincher, who directed The Social Network, that unfortunately performed pretty poorly at the box office that year, which is really sad because this movie is excellent. It's a great kind of whodunit, and everybody gives top-notch performances, and in my opinion, it's better than the original version that it's based off of. It just didn't connect with American audiences for some reason, and that's really sad. Another one of my favorite films from 2011 is Warrior. It's a mixed martial arts movie. Stars Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton and Nick Nolte. And that movie is just an emotional gut punch, no pun intended. And it's even if you aren't into mixed martial arts or anything, it's seriously just one of the best fighting movies that there is, and it's got the story to back it up as well as the action. I also really enjoyed 127 Hours, pretty much just James Franco dominating the screen for an hour and a half, and playing a real life person very well, and depicting his situation in an accurate and respectful way, and yeah, it's a crazy story from start to finish. One of my favorite animated movies from the year is Nickelodeon's Rango. That I seriously think it won the Best Animated Picture Oscar, but I still feel like somehow Rango is an underrated animated movie. Like, I don't know a lot of people that talk about it, to this day, but it's visually just insane, and it's interesting, and it has a cool like Western feel. It's probably one of the better Western movies of the 2010s, in my opinion, and it's animated, which is crazy. But it's got a lot to love, and Johnny Depp really knocks it out of the park as the lead character. The next three movies I'm going to mention, I think, are three of the most underrated of the entire decade. There's Kevin Smith's Red State. This was kind of a dark comedy that was totally different for Kevin Smith at the time. He had only been known for kind of like stoner comedies in his Viewish universe, but he went outside the box with Red State, and I think he totally knocked it out of the park. He had John Goodman in there, and just some very interesting things he did with tone. It'd go from being funny to being super serious, and then off the walls bonkers with crazy action. And another underrated movie from this year I thought was Blue Valentine. This is a movie from a director-writer named Derek Cianfrance, and this movie is just soul-crushing from start to finish. It is so incredibly sad, but it is so worth it, and it is like great to be manipulated and feel sad by a movie like that. I think it's effective in everything that it tried to do, and it flashes between Ryan Gosling and Michelle Williams' relationship at the start and at the end, and kind of showed the contrast between the two and how they used to love each other and now they don't, and how that can affect not only themselves but others around them. And it's just an emotionally draining movie, but totally worth it. The movie that I almost picked as my favorite for 2011, but I just gave it to another movie just by a little bit, was We Need to Talk About Kevin. This is another emotionally draining, crazy movie that kind of poses a lot of ethical questions, and it's based on a book that was banned of the same title, and it talks about a lot of dark subject matter, but it's very, very good. And my number one pick for the movie of 2011 is Drive. This is another Ryan Gosling movie from this year that just absolutely wrecked me. It's so good. I have to constantly rewatch it. It kind of had misleading trailers. They kind of made it look like it was going to be some huge action-packed movie that would like almost rival Fast and the Furious, but it was totally not that. It was totally a different kind of movie, and it was a lot slower and more of a character study, but it was far more interesting to me than a Fast and the Furious movie. And it just has a great cast, great writing, and a lot to love. Moving on to 2012, some of my favorite movies from this year included Wanderlust. It was just a quirky little comedy that starred Jennifer Aniston and Paul Rudd, and they moved to a commune, and I just endlessly rewatch that movie. I think it's so funny, just from start to finish. It's from the same people who made Wet Hot American Summer, which is another one of my favorite comedies, and it's just a joy to watch all the time. And that movie is stacked with tons of hilarious actors as well as great dramatic actors. Key and Peele are in it. Alan Alda from MASH. It's got just everybody you can think of in it. End of Watch with Jake Gyllenhaal and Michael Pena as police officers in L.A. That was just some great chemistry between two actors that I didn't think would work well, but they worked incredibly well together. Looper, Rian Johnson's sci-fi movie with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis, was just an awesome, interesting, and original idea. Yeah, it has some flaws because it introduces time travel, and if you think about it too much, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's at least an original idea in a time when there's not a lot of original ideas, a lot of remakes, a lot of reboots. So it was just a refreshing idea, and I loved it. This year also saw a really good horror movie in Sinister. The 2010s in general, I think, was very good to horror movies. There's a lot of really interesting and original ideas, and I think Sinister perfectly fits that category.
Skyfall, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, Silver Linings Playbook, The Master, Django Unchained, The Raid Redemption, Short Term 12, American Hustle, Before Midnight, The Conjuring, The Hunger Games Catching Fire, Dallas Buyers Club, Fruitvale Station, Francis Ha, We're the Millers, Mud, The Spectacular Now, Star Trek Into Darkness, Prisoners, The Wolf of Wall Street, Gravity, 12 Years a Slave.
My pick for the best movie of 2013 is The Place Beyond the Pines. It stars Ryan Gosling, Ray Liotta, and Bradley Cooper, and it is just such a gripping and powerful movie from start to finish. It deals with time, and it basically has a three-act structure, and each act follows a different character or set of characters, and it kind of shows through each act how the actions of the previous character affects the others. I seriously think it's one of the most underrated movies of the decade, and everyone should see it. Moving on to 2014, I think that this might be the best year of the decade as far as movies of just high caliber and high quality. I think that this year put out some of the best movies of the decade and some of my favorite movies of all time. Some of the great movies that came out this year include Her, The Lego Movie, The Grand Budapest Hotel, Captain America, The Winter Soldier, The Raid 2, Locke, Blue Ruin, X-Men Days of Future Past, Chef, Edge of Tomorrow, The Fault in Our Stars, How to Train Your Dragon 2, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Guardians of the Galaxy, Fury, John Wick, Nightcrawler, Wild, Interstellar, and these two movies could have easily been in the first spot as well, but there was just one movie that I liked better than them. Whiplash and Birdman were just two of the best movies I've ever seen, and they were both up for Best Picture. Birdman ended up winning, which I think is totally deserved. That movie is a masterclass in great filmmaking, and I just happen to like one movie more than both of those. So my favorite movie of 2014 was Boyhood, Richard Linklater's film that was shot for over 12 years, from when the main character was 6 years old all the way to when he's 18, and you literally get to witness actors age on screen, and it's just the best slice of life film I've ever seen, in my opinion. And it was right in that age range for me. It just connected with me in every way, with the growth and overwhelming sensation of technology in our world and how it affects everything, and growing up into becoming a man. Just everybody was great, and it was such a risk of a movie because you can't contractually obligate anyone to stay attached to a film for that long, but they would just shoot it 1 or 2 days out of a year, and just got some genuine performances out of children. And it does all these interesting things where it doesn't really tell you when the time skips happen. You just kind of hear music, and the music is of that year, whatever was on the radio at that time. And it's just such a subtle way to show you that time has passed. We're into the next year of this boy's life, and you get to see the technology grow with him. It's just a great movie. 10 out of 10. Highly recommend. One of my favorite movies of all time. Moving on to 2015, some of my favorite movies from this year were Selma, Ex Machina, Mad Max Fury Road, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Straight Outta Compton, Sicario, Steve Jobs, The End of the Tour, Spotlight, Creed, The Big Short, The Hateful Eight, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Well, my favorite movie of 2015 was The Lobster. This is one of the strangest movies I've ever seen. but it is just so well done and is such an interesting, unique, and original idea. And Yorgos Lanthimos is quickly becoming one of my favorite directors of all time. He'll just make this darkly funny subject matter, and just he's got such a strange way of making movies that I think is absolutely welcomed and necessary and just enjoyable from start to finish. Every single one of his movies I've seen has just been great and will be in one of my lists for every single year that it comes out. Now we're on to 2016. Some of my favorite movies from this year included The Revenant, Room, Deadpool, Everybody Wants Some, Captain America Civil War, The Nice Guys, Popstar Never Stop Never Stopping, Swiss Army Man, Captain Fantastic, Hell or High Water, Moonlight, Manchester by the Sea, La La Land. And my pick for the best movie of 2016 had to be the sci-fi movie Arrival. This is just top-notch filmmaking, and Amy Adams gives possibly her best performance I've seen yet, and I think she was totally snubbed at the Oscars. And the French director Denis Villeneuve is definitely one of my favorite directors currently working. He's done Blade Runner 2049, Arrival, Prisoners, Sicario, Enemy. Seriously, any movie that he is involved with is a must-see. He just makes such interesting, gripping movies, and it is always a great time seeing one of his movies in the cinema. Moving on to 2017, some of my favorite movies of the year included Martin Scorsese's religious film Silence. Totally underrated movie. If you haven't seen it, I think that movie went under the radar for a lot of people. It's a bit of a hard sell because it's about 3 hours long, and it is about religion, and it can be slow, but it is so worth it. It's like the Apocalypse Now of religious films, and it's definitely, everyone should see it. Get Out, Logan, Kong Skull Island, Baby Driver, Dunkirk, Wind River, Good Time, It, Mother, Suburbicon, The Meyerowitz Stories, Thor Ragnarok, The Florida Project, Lady Bird, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, The Disaster Artist, The Shape of Water, and I'm probably going to get some flack for this, but Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, was also one of my favorite movies of the year, and possibly my favorite of the new trilogy. My favorite movie of 2017 had to be Blade Runner 2049. This is another Denis Villeneuve movie making it onto my list, second year in a row, but it is just such amazing filmmaking and masterful from start to finish. And unfortunately, it did not that well at the box office, which I guess is sort of to be expected. Not a lot of sci-fi does that well or connects with a large audience, but for a movie that is a sequel nearly 40 years down the line, it is just excellent filmmaking and possibly one of the best sequels of all time, hands down. And just every aspect of it, the visuals, the cinematography, the directing, acting, the story, it's all so interesting, and I cannot wait to see what Denis Villeneuve does next with Dune. It's going to be another hard sell, and I really hope that people go out to the theater to see it because the cast is amazing for it, and the source material is there, so everybody get your ass out to the theater to go see Dune when it comes out in 2020. Okay, we're on 2018. Some of my favorite movies from this year included Molly's Game. Aaron Sorkin wrote and directed it. It was his directorial debut. Jessica Chastain gives an amazing performance. It's a movie about poker, but it is just more than that. It's great. I cannot recommend this movie enough. If you haven't seen Molly's Game, please go see it. Phantom Thread, Paul Thomas Anderson's movie with Daniel Day-Lewis. It's apparently Daniel Day-Lewis's last movie ever, according to him. Says he's retiring. It's another great performance he can put under his belt. It is a hard sell because it's about a guy who makes dresses, but it's Mostly the movie has to do with themes of power and power dynamics in relationship, particularly between men and women, and it's just an incredible set of performances from all the actors and actresses involved. Annihilation, another super underrated movie coming out of 2018. Another underrated sci-fi that underperformed at the box office. Some seriously beautiful visuals. It's from the guy who made Ex Machina, Alex Garland. He's another one that everyone should just be going out and seeing his movies. He's a great writer, great director, and Annihilation and Ex Machina more than prove his worth in Hollywood. Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs. It was just such a cute, enjoyable movie experience. It reminded me a lot of Fantastic Mr. Fox, which is one of my favorites. And it went back to that stop motion, and it's just unfortunately there's not a lot of stop motion movies being made anymore, and Wes Anderson has such a unique take in movie making in general, and his stop motion movies are no exception. They're great. Avengers Infinity War absolutely wrecked me when I saw it. The ending, I think I rewatched that movie like 10 times that year. It just, I was so hyped for the next one. It was just the perfect teaser, the perfect cliffhanger, and it's one of the only comic books that I ever read. So it was, I felt an attachment to the source material, unlike some of the other comic book movies that I'd seen before it. But it's the Russo brothers. Every single movie that they did in the MCU, just they knocked it out of the park. First Reformed also came out this year. Awesome performance from Ethan Hawke on some really tough subject matter about religion and environmentalism and big business and corporations. It tackled a lot of really important themes that need to be addressed, and Ethan Hawke just carried that movie. Incredibles 2 came out this year as well. That's another solid sequel, solid follow-up to one of my favorite movies of all time. Pixar just knows how to dish them out. Bo Burnham had his directorial debut with 8th Grade. This movie was so uncomfortable and so cringy, just like middle school was, just like 8th Grade was. And he did a really good job of putting you in the footsteps and in the mind of an 8th grader. But nowadays, with the technology, you might not be able to relate to it as much, but there are aspects of it that put you there and make you feel like you're in her position, and just some really good casting. That they didn't do like a lot of makeup or anything. They wanted to go for the really natural look, and I think Bo Burnham is a great artist, and I'm very excited to see what he does with the rest of his career. Some other great movies that came out this year: Black Klansman, A Star Is Born, Bad Times at the El Royale, First Man, Halloween, Mid-90s, Green Book, Widows, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And this movie was almost my top pick. It was hard for me to decide between the top two, but just got beat out by a little bit was The Favorite, another Yorgos Lanthimos movie. He did The Lobster. The Favorite definitely would have been my pick for Best Picture winner. It was another really unique and interesting take from Yorgos Lanthimos, and you don't see a lot of movies like the ones that he makes, so I'm always interested and I'm always on edge. And this was probably his most tame movie. It's not terribly dark, but it is just so gripping and so interesting, and he got 3 amazing performances out of the lead actresses. And yeah, I feel like this movie people have already stopped talking about it, and it's only been a little over a year, but this movie should not stop being talked about. The Favorite is one of the best movies of the decade, for sure. But my number one pick for 2018 was Hereditary. It seriously is my favorite horror movie of the decade. Probably one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I would definitely put it in my top 3 favorite horror movies of all time. I cannot stop thinking about this movie in several situations. It's just such great performances, such an interesting idea, an interesting demon movie. It had me for the entire time. It definitely worked on me. I understand that the movie is polarizing. A lot of people think it's pretentious. I can see that, but it worked for me. All of it worked for me. It's just was such an interesting take, and horror is and director writer Ari Aster is just a welcome addition to the horror world. And his follow up Midsommar was also one of my favorite horror movies of the decade. And he's got an eye for cinema, and he's got interesting original ideas, and Hollywood should be fostering these really original filmmakers. So that is my favorite movie of 2018, Hereditary. Now we move on to 2019. These are the most recent films. Obviously, I still haven't seen a lot of movies in 2019. Most notably, one that I really want to see is Jojo Rabbit. So this list might be kind of incomplete because I still have to play some catch up from 2019. Some of my favorite movies of the year included How to Train Your Dragon 3, Avengers Endgame, Toy Story 4, Midsommar, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Joker, El Camino, The Lighthouse, The Irishman, Marriage Story, Uncut Gems. And this movie was almost my number one pick of the year, and I know it's on a lot of people's lists, and it got nominated for a great deal of Oscars, which is awesome. Parasite. I loved this movie, and I understand all the hype and all the critical acclaim. I can't stop thinking about it. It's been about 2 weeks now since I've seen it, and it's still just going through my mind. A lot of really interesting ideas, very unique story, and it's South Korean, and Bong Joon-ho, the director, has more than shown that he is an amazing talent that should not be ignored. He's been directing great movies out of Korea for a while. Snowpiercer, The Host, Okja. He's one of the best Korean filmmakers of all time, without a doubt. And Parasite is one of the best movies of the decade, for sure. However, my number one pick for the best movie of 2019 that I've seen so far is Knives Out. This movie just took me by surprise. I love Rian Johnson. I think he's a great writer-director. I'll watch anything that he makes. But this was just my favorite time at the movies this year. It was my best movie-going experience. It has an amazing stacked cast, a witty script. It's a whodunit, a murder mystery. There's not a lot of those being made anymore. A lot of them have been kind of kept to television, and they're all contained within one episode or so. And I think that this genre needs to come back. You know, for fans of Clue or Murder on the Orient Express or any of those Agatha Christie novels, this will definitely be one of your best enjoyable movie going experiences. It has everything. It's campy. It's funny. It's gripping. It's everything that I love in a movie, just wrapped into one. So those were my favorite movies of the decade. Let me know what you guys think. Like this video. Leave a comment below. Subscribe if you haven't already. I understand that my list is not going to be the same as your list, and that's just the world that we live in. We are human beings with free will and opinions, and I like these movies, and I'm going to keep watching them because that's my prerogative. Peace.